Olá, eu sou Sérgio Simão, presidente do Museu Judaico de São Paulo, e hoje eu estou aqui com muito prazer para terminar a série Epopeia Sefaradi. Nós vimos histórias de famílias, de pessoas que imigraram de vários países sefaradim, países orientais, para o Brasil, e hoje nós temos um fechamento muito especial para essa série. Nós vamos falar com o professor Norman Stillman, de Jerusalém, que é o maior especialista mundial em história dos judeus em países islâmicos. Welcome, Professor Stillman. Eu queria lembrar que o Professor Stillman está em Jerusalém, lá são meia-noite, ele se propôs a ficar acordado até esse horário só para falar conosco aqui hoje, o que é uma grande honra. O professor Stillman, ele se graduou na Universidade da Pensilvânia, se especializou em estudos judaicos e foi o grande professor de História Judaica da Universidade de Oklahoma. Ele publicou um livro sobre judeus dos países islâmicos de muito sucesso e que lançou ele na arena internacional como um grande especialista de judaísmo nos países islâmicos. Ele também é o editor da Enciclopédia de Judaísmo nos Países Islâmicos, que é um volume são 5 volumes dessa enciclopédia, cobrindo todos os países, todos os tópicos. E, atualmente, ele é um Distinguished Visiting Professor da Universidade Hebraica de Jerusalém, onde ele orienta vários alunos em teses de pós-graduação, onde ele faz pesquisa, continua fazendo pesquisa e publicando sobre judaísmo em países islâmicos. E um dos alunos dele é o outro entrevistado de hoje à noite, Michel Gordon. Michel Gordon é brasileiro, estudou física na USP, acabou entrando no mercado financeiro, hoje ele trabalha em banco em Luxemburgo, mora em Luxemburgo, mas ele fez um mestrado em estudos islâmicos em Jerusalém com o professor Norman Stillman, e além disso o Michel é fotógrafo e andou por todos os países islâmicos procurando restos de judaísmo, publicou um livro de bastante sucesso há cerca de uns 12 anos atrás, não é, Michel? E ele vai estar aqui nos mostrando as fotos que ele fez desses países, enquanto que o professor Stillman nos conta um pouquinho da história dos judeus nesses países. Professor Stillman, it's a great honor to have you here with us tonight, and I thank you for your effort of being up so late to talk to us. Thank you very much. Michel, you take it from here.
Muito obrigado.
Okay, good. Michel, you can start.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Sérgio Simon, for the opportunity to be here this evening, this night actually, with my inspiration, my mentor, my professor, and my friend, Norman Stillman. And we have too many subjects to discuss. I will show some pictures here. So I would like to, before starting showing the pictures of my visit in Islamic countries, maybe if you could take 1 or 2 minutes to summarize, if it's possible, what 13 centuries of Jewish life in Islamic world. Please, Professor.
Well, first of all, and again, thank you for inviting me to be here. The Islamic world had the majority of Jews in the entire world all the way up to the beginning of the 17th century. And in a sense, the Jews of the Islamic world are the ones who created everything that we have today in Judaism. The Talmud may have been redacted before Islam came to the Middle East in the 7th century, but it was under Islam, which, and you can see in this wonderful map here, extended all the way from the borders of India and China, all the way up to the Pyrenees, the Atlantic Ocean and the Pyrenees in the West, that all the aspects that we think of today as part of Judaism really became codified and spread from the Jewish centers in Iraq, and in Israel, and some of the great the first prayer books, the first siddur. Every time you go to synagogue and you use a siddur, remember that the first siddur is put together by Saadia Gaon in Baghdad in the beginning of the 10th century, and that those who follow Jewish law, that the first real code of Jewish law is Maimonides' Mishnah Torah, which was done in the 12th century, and following that, the Shulchan Aruch of Rabbi Yosef Karo, who came from Spain but went to the Ottoman Empire, and it was there that the basic code that we use today of Jewish law was codified and spread throughout the Jewish world. The Arabic language was the longest lasting Jewish language, going from basically the 10th century all the way up to the 20th. And Ashkenazi Jews may think of Yiddish as Mama Loshen, as the mother tongue, but Judeo-Arabic produced for a much longer time a great literature, which is still part of the classics of Jewish literature. And even by the mid 20th century, you had 1 million Jews living in the Islamic world, about 750,000 of them in the Arabic speaking countries, and most of these were ancient communities. They were there before most of what we call the Arab countries had any Arabs. They were there before Turkey had any Turks, and they left in a basic exodus which started in the 19th century as people looked for better opportunities. In fact, that's when they first start coming to Brazil. Moroccan Jews coming from the beginning of the 19th century, coming to Brazil. This million population today is somewhere around 33,000. There are only about 3,000, a little more than 3,500 left in the Arab world, and about 9,000 to 12,000 left in Turkey, and about 15,000 in Iran. And
this is what we call you call the last chapter in your book, right?
That's right. We are now living in the period of the last chapter, and that many people say, well, it was the Arab-Israeli conflict, and yes, that was the last straw which brought large numbers out of the. But already, as people were getting a Western education through groups like the Alliance Israélite Universelle, which opened its first school in 1862 in Morocco, and by the year 1900, 100,000 children had received a modern education, French being the language for most of the schools, and began to seek better opportunities all over the world.
We cannot forget, Professor, that in these countries like mainly Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco, for example, tell me if I'm wrong, but the Jews were second-class citizens, and somehow not in Algeria because of the Premier Decret, but the fact that they had this education and new opportunities, even more than the Arabs, made them see themselves as why I'm here as a second citizenship.
Of course, in the Middle Ages, the Islamic world was, by medieval standards, a very tolerant civilization. Jews were, and Christians were allowed freedom of religion within discrete boundaries, freedom of economic endeavor. It was not like Europe, where they were not allowed to join the guilds, where they were not allowed to own land. they could be in any occupation, and they had their own internal autonomy. But by medieval standards, that was a great deal. But by the time you get a modern education, and with the coming, especially of European colonialism, many felt, yes, that this was second-class citizenship. Up until that time, one didn't think in any case of citizenship. You were a member of your religious community, and you knew that if things were different, you would be on top, and they would be the second class. So, but it was only in the modern times that they took this new attitude where, yes, why should they be second class?
Yeah, and but somehow, and then I take the opportunity to start showing some pictures of Morocco when I visited in 2004. Somehow the Jews who came from the Arab countries and Islamic countries in general, they have this feeling of good times they lived. They somehow they miss. I don't know if in its totality, but for example, my grandmother, she was from Morocco, and she used to say that how she loved Morocco, and she has this feeling of a good feeling that she wanted to even visit Morocco back. And in our discussions, you told that it's not the same feeling as, for example, a Polish Jew. He does not want to go back to Poland. It's something. There is something different between these two groups. I mean, of course, there was the Holocaust, but my point is how this generation, this old generation, like my grandmother or my grandfather, how do they miss Morocco and has this good feeling of past time? I think we lost Professor Stillman, but I go on with showing some pictures of the Jewish cemetery in Rabat. By the way, Professor Stillman told me that this cemetery that I took pictures in 2004 was renovated, and we can find the tombs and the names if anyone is interested on searching the family. When I visited Morocco, this is something, it was different from other Arab countries. First, because it was far from Israel, and secondly, because even the Moroccan, they miss the Jews. They have this feeling of where are our fellow brothers, let's say. So I was taking a picture of a Jewish name in the street in the Mellah of Rabat. Then I met this gentleman. He brought me into. Professor, are you back?
Yes, I.
Yeah. We don't.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Now I hear.
Okay, it was my internet.
Yeah. Okay. I was just showing. I show first the picture of the cemetery of Morocco. And now yes. I was showing. I don't know if you remember the story of the school in Morocco. That this gentleman brought me into his house and start cleaning the walls and showing the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, in where it was a Beit Sefer, a school in the Mellah of Rabat.
And what, of course, is so typical here about Morocco. If this were other Arab countries, he would not want to show you that. He would not want to have that visible. But in Morocco, and in several as well, there's a great deal of nostalgia for the Jewish past.
That's my point. That's the point that I was.
And you can see it also. The Tunisians have made several movies. Moroccans, one or two as well, in which they look back at the time when Jews were there, and these are not the anti-Semitic images that you would see in Egyptian movies or in Lebanese or Syrian television series that are shown. These actually are ones that have a sympathetic, nostalgic look back at the past. And of course in Morocco, there are actually Moroccan students studying Jewish history. And when we did the Encyclopedia of Jews in the Islamic World, the only two Islamic countries, Arab countries, for which we had people writing articles that would be scientific articles for a resource, were from Morocco and Tunisia.
And in Morocco, there is the only Jewish museum in the Arab lands, right?
That's correct. The Jewish Museum in Morocco there are only two Jewish museums in the Islamic world. One of them is in Turkey, which is not Arab, and the other is in Morocco.
But Professor, tell me something. I was looking this picture, and this is the picture of the tomb of Solika, who was a saint. But what is this saint feeling of the Moroccan Jews? What can you tell just a brief thing, something about this?
One of the interesting things about North African Jewry in general is the veneration of holy men and holy women. And Sulika, her name was Sol Hachuel. She was a young woman in Morocco in the 19th century. Her neighbors, she had a fight with her mother. The neighbors said that she converted to Islam. She denied it. Remember, to convert to Islam, all you have to do is say, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. There is no God but God. Muhammad is the messenger of God. And that's it. There's no further ceremony. In any case, she was sent to Fez. She was ordered to either remain a Muslim or convert to Islam or die. She chose martyrdom and earned her sainthood the old-fashioned way by becoming a martyr. And her grave, by the way, North African religion in general, Muslims also have a veneration of saints. In Hebrew, they're called Sadiqim, Sadi'im in Moroccan Jewish Arabic. But she became so famous that there were books written about her in Spanish, in French, in the 19th century, romantic books. And one of the romantic painters, Alfred de Andon, did this painting he called it the execution of a Jewess, but it's basically the story of Sol Hachuel, Lalla Sulika, and there's her tomb, which people go to on pilgrimages. And
I'll ask you to tell the story of how you found out that there is this Jewish saints in Morocco.
Right, because this is before I ever came to Morocco. I fell in love with a Moroccan Israeli girl, and one day we're crossing the street and almost were hit by a car, and she went, Rabbi Haim Kohen. And I said, who's Rabbi Haim Kohen? And she said, Sadiq. He's a Sadiq. Then another time, my mother-in-law had some experience of a fright or a shock, and she said, Allah Sulika. And I asked, who's Lala Sulika? And she said, a tzadika. And then a sister-in-law of, as you know, Moroccan families tend to be traditionally are very big. My wife was one of 8 children. And her sister said, Rabbi Amran. And by that time I realized who is Rabbi Amran. And then afterwards I made a study of it. And I've written about the phenomenon. And there are a number of books that have been written about this whole veneration of holy men. And if you go to France, where I was a visiting professor for a year, in some of the Jewish neighborhoods, like especially the 19th arrondissement, you go into a travel agency, and there are posters for the pilgrimages in Morocco, in Algeria, in Tunisia. I think you have a picture later on for one of the festivals.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I will show it. I will
people from here go, and people from here go as well, because you can go from Israel to Morocco, and people go for Rabbi Amran's festival, which is always on Lag BaOmer, and they're called Hilula, which in Aramaic means a wedding, but that's because the saint is now married to God, one could say. And you have Hilulot. Dr. Simon mentioned he's a descendant of Rabbi Pinto, and I have actually been at the Hilula for Rabbi Pinto here in Israel, where there's a festive meal, candles are lit, and one venerates the memory of a holy person.
This is a fascinating story of the veneration of saints in Morocco. I'm passing the pictures. We have so many things to show and discuss. These are some synagogues in Fez. This one, I would say that one of the most beautiful synagogues in Islamic countries that I visited, the Ruben Ben Sadoun.
And when you look at it, one of the things in Europe and America in the 19th century, when they started building big synagogues, especially the reform movement, they had a thing called Neo-Andalusian architecture, which was a sort of imitation of the Andalusian, because of the feeling that there was the golden age of Spain and so on. But here you really see Andalusian architecture. You look at the carved plasterwork on the upper walls. You look at the gratings on the sides. You look at the hanging lamps, and the azulejos. By the way, I think in Portuguese the word for tile is something like zalige, isn't it?
Sorry,
the word for tile in Portuguese.
Azulejo.
That's right. And it's from Arabic. It's an Arabic word. And there you see the zalige tiles all along the floor.
This is a picture of at that time the Museu in Fez. I think now it's a little bit better, I imagine, because at that time it seems that it was just a gathering of pictures from Jews who left Morocco, and they put all together in a wall and named this as a museum.
Right, and it was basically just a small building next to the cemetery. Now there's a real museum there, and it's, as I said, the only one in an Arab country.
This is the cemetery in Tanger, absolutely abandoned, and well, of course, when I visited these countries, I was expecting to find someone, a Jew, living there. And by the way, in Tanger, I met the Rabbin Jugé. I think it's the chief rabbin or quelque chose comme ça.
Yeah.
And Torgman, I think was his name. And he issued an extrait de naissance of my grandfather, official extrait de naissance of my grandfather from a rabbi in Tanger. He was there.
And the Tangier Jewish community was a very sophisticated community because of it being the important port and being it was part of Morocco, but it was really controlled by Europeans already for centuries. and the Jews of Tangier, they sat on the city council. It was quite different from the rest of Morocco. And I mean, I haven't been there for now a little over 20 years, but there used to be a famous Jewish club there called the Casino. And there's the Naon Synagogue, which is a historical monument, which was restored a number of years back, and it also is a beautiful Andalusian architecture.
Well, this school, this was the Jewish school in Meknes, but I think you have a story related to it, right?
Yes, when you sent me the picture, my wife, who grew up in Meknes, looked at it, and she said, "That was my Hebrew school." She went to French schools for her secular education, but this was where she learned the Aleph Bet and the prayers and modern Hebrew. So she was very moved to see it.
Good. But by the way, the Alliance Israélite that you said, it was set up in Morocco in 1867 or something like
62.
this. 62, sorry.
Right, in Tétouan, and then 2 years later they opened a second school in Tangier. And what makes the Alliance schools so special is that they had schools for girls as well as boys, and that was absolutely unique. And remember, in Muslim, there were no modern Muslim schools to begin with, but they created an entirely new class of upwardly mobile individuals who could take part in the modern economy in a way that was unthinkable before.
And when I went to Iran, the first time I've been in Iran in 2001, I met some Jews, and they didn't speak English, but we could communicate to each other in French. They said, "I want to speak French." They studied at Alliance Israélite in Tehran or in Isfahan. I don't know which city they studied.
You had them in Isfahan, and you had it in Tehran.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And you had it in Shiraz. And basically, what in the past had been the first foreign language for Jews was Spanish. Secondly, Italian, because you had Jews who had come from Livorno, who originally were from Spain, but then Livorno, and then into the Arab countries. But by the end of the 19th century, French was the lingua franca for the Jews from Morocco all the way across to Iran. And what's interesting is some of them actually became well-known writers in French. The head of the Canadian Writers Union, for example, Naim Katan, is an Iraqi Jew from Baghdad, who wrote whose first book was called Adieu Babylon, Farewell Babylon, and it's been translated into just about every language in the world. I'm sure there's a Portuguese translation as well. It's in English, it's in Hebrew, it's in many languages. And you had from Egypt numerous French language writers who became very important in French literature as well.
And even Egypt being British colony or British.
That's right. As of the 1880s, it was controlled by Britain, but the language of culture was French.
Yeah. So I want to show now. I don't know where is the. Here, exactly.
Yeah.
So this was surprising for me. In the first view, I found the extrait de naissance of my mother in Arabic and in French, and I told my mother she was born in the year 1300 and something. But the point here is when I saw the signature of my grandfather, and I could recognize the handwriting in Arabic. And for us, after studying, of course, it's kind of obvious. But before, when I was, I don't know, 20 years old, and we grow up with this feeling that the Arab are the enemies because of the conflict, Israel-Palestinian conflict. But it was surprising to see, and even to discover that my grandmother spoke Arabic at the time. Of course, now it's a kind of obvious for me. But I remember this feeling of being surprised to find some documents in Arabic, or to see that they lived in Arabic countries and they spoke Arabic, indeed. So in Tunisia, we discussed this picture of children going back from school, Jewish, wearing kippot and freely in the island of Jerba. And you told me that this island, actually, the Muslims there are the Haraji.
That's right. They call themselves the Ibadiyya, but it's the Khariji sect, and since they were persecuted by other Muslims, and they also once they considered other Muslims also to be pagans. They are very tolerant, more so even than the best of mainstream Islam. And they're famous for saying that a Jew can say, there is no God but God. Muhammad is the messenger of God, but not for us. And now they only exist in the fringes of the Muslim world, the island of Jerba, southern Algeria in a few oases of the Sahara, Zanzibar, and Oman. And Oman, of course, the Sultan of Oman had Prime Minister Netanyahu there as his visitor just a few months ago. Again, because they are a special branch of a very small sect of Islam.
Yeah, it was a surprise for me, because when we study Islam, the Harajite, they killed Ali, and they were very strict for the Muslims, maybe, but not for the others. That's right. The interesting surprise. This picture shows a little bit of what you said about pilgrimage in La Ghariba, the synagogue in Tunis. And we go forward here just to show this tribute for the Tunisian Jews deported to Auschwitz, or to the camps, extermination camps in Europe. And this is also, it might be a surprise for some of our audience to know that Tunisia was indeed for some time part of the Nazi countries, or not exactly.
For 6 months, Tunisia was occupied by the Afrika Korps of Rommel, and the Germans were there. They occupied it. There were labor camps, and actually, I found a letter from the head of the SS in Tunisia, writing back to Germany, explaining, yes, we would like to do here what we do in Europe, but we don't have rail lines leading back, and also we don't have we don't have the right manpower, and so on. So we can't do all of that. But what they were about to introduce the yellow star badge, just as they were being thrown out. And there's actually a very good movie on the occupation, and it's a friendship between a Jewish girl and a Muslim girl. Their families live in the same house, and it's called Le Chant des Mariés, the song of the marriages, and it's very touching, and it's in French. And by the way, there was a special issue for those. I'm sure many people there read French in the Jewish community in Brazil, and the journal called Revue de l'Histoire de la Shoah the Review of the History of the Shoah, a year and a half ago, did a special, it's about a 600-page, enormously thick issue on North Africa during the Nazi period, and I wrote the introductory chapter for it. And actually, not just North Africa, but in fact, all the way into the Islamic world. And as you know, unfortunately, many Arab nationalists were very pro-Nazi.
Yeah, this is mainly in Iraq. I believe that it was a little bit. The government was absolutely. It was part of the Axis, right? It became
for 5 months, the government of Iraq became an ally throughout the pro British monarch, who was only a boy at the time anyway. And just as the British come back, there was a pogrom in Baghdad called the Farhud, which caused terrible damage, death and destruction.
This was the end of the Jewish community, the millennial Jewish community in Baghdad, actually, right? After the Farhud, after 10 years.
After the Farhud, they sort of semi-rebuilt. But of course, when Israel became independent, Iraq was one of the centers of virulent Arab nationalism, and of course there was in 1950 there was the great airlift of the Jews out of Iraq, and 95% of the Jews of Iraq left on the airlift called Operation Ezra and Nehemiah.
Yeah, let's go back to the presentation here. Well, this is the boucherie in Tunis. I just found interesting the way this sir was dressing, because it was a very old style. And
by the way, one of the things you should remember is that because kosher meat is halal by Islamic law, Muslims also bought from kosher butchers, and which is, of course, something which would never have even happened in Europe. And one of the universities where I taught in America, the State University of New York, had a kosher dining hall, and there were Muslim students who regularly ate in the kosher dining hall because they knew that the meat was halal.
Yeah, when I want to eat some kosher here and it's difficult to find, I go to the supermarket, I see halal, and I buy. Somehow I feel that it's almost the same procedures. Well, this was actually the state of the synagogue Magen Avraham in Beirut, in Wadi Abu Jmil. I took this picture in 2003, and if you see the interior of the synagogue, it was absolutely abandoned. This was, and there was no Jews living there, in the Rue de Paris or in other streets in this neighborhood, which was essentially a Jewish neighborhood, very well located and very beautiful. The place, it's nice, it's wonderful, nice atmosphere. But we have this picture sent by the Kamkaji family of a recent renovation of this synagogue, as you can see. But it seems that it's kind of just to show, right, Professor? Because there was there's no Jews there, and somehow, why these countries want to we also saw recently the synagogue of Alexandria also renovated.
That's right. The Eliyahu Hanavi synagogue in Alexandria was just renovated, and there are all of 40 Jews left in Egypt, mostly elderly women, actually.
Yeah. So it's strange why these countries are renovating this, unlike Morocco, which seems to be sincere or something coming from I don't know. I think that this renovation is just to show some kind of, you see how we preserve our Jewish heritage, and something as a propaganda.
Yes, no, it's purely to give the impression. It's good public relations for the Western world. But in the case, also, of course, in the case of Lebanon, because of the civil strife there, which is religiously connected, there are those who really would like to show that there was a different Lebanon. And actually, a younger colleague of mine who is a Lebanese Maronite, Frank Salame, just did a book on the Jews of Lebanon. And he really, but of course, he studied Hebrew. He even went to Israel. And so, but there are such people. And look, just the same thing here in Israel. We have several Moroccan graduate students who are here very quietly doing their graduate work on the history of the Jews in their country. And very often they're also registered. I have one who's a doctoral student of mine here, but he's also registered with a French university, so that when he goes back to Morocco, it won't be with an Israeli PhD, but with a French PhD.
But by the way, I saw recently, I think maybe yesterday or before yesterday, in Jerusalem Post, that there is a researcher from Saudi Arabia that published in.
That's right. He just published an article in Hebrew in an Israeli journal.
Things are changing, maybe somehow, or some.
Yes, and we also, just one other thing I think I'm at liberty to tell you. We have groups of Iraqi young people who come here every summer. Muslims mostly, also some Iraqi Christians, and they come to see the country and to understand it better. And of course, they come. It's all very discreet.
So, Professor, we have only 15 minutes. Let's unfortunately, let's run with the pictures. Can you go back? Okay, this is the cemetery in Beirut. It was amazing because the cemetery, it was in the Rue de Damas, which is the green line between the east and west Beirut.
And by the way, with a very important name for Brazil.
Yes, absolutely. It's a very important family in Brazil. And the family actually came from this city, and this is the Talmud Torah of Aleppo. This was a picture that I took in 2010, sorry, just before the Civil War. So probably none of these buildings, not only the Talmud Torah, but also the others, does not exist anymore. Aleppo
is a thorough disaster. I mean, the city has been leveled.
Yeah, the Harat al-Yahud, the Jewish neighborhood in Damascus. This was interesting because I indeed found some Jews, and I visited the Jewish center in Damascus. This was in 2010, 10 years ago, and there is the rabbi between the Assad family and the synagogue, and also I was very touched when I took this picture because I saw it reminds me my school in Brazil, my Jewish school where I studied in Brazil, and empty with and this was somehow very touching when I saw this image, and of course with the Mr. Assad in the background.
Yes.
They left their houses here. I don't know if it's easy for you to see a mezuzah in the door. It's very complicated. I don't know if I can show you, but there is
I can see it.
There is a mezuzah. So these are the Jewish homes. They left in a hope that one day they can go back. And this was a very rich house in Damascus. The style is wonderful. And there are some Hebrew inscriptions in it, showing
That's
that
right.
this belongs to a Jew. This house belonged to a Jew. This was a house with no less than, I would say, 30 or 40 rooms. It's a palace, actually. It was one of that Damascene houses. Absolutely fantastic. Well, in Egypt, I had a lot of difficulties on taking the pictures because of Madame Carmen, the head of the Jewish community. She did not allow me to take pictures, maybe afraid of being, she didn't know me, she didn't allow me to take pictures. So I took some clandestine pictures, some off-records pictures of the synagogue Shahar HaShamayim, or for example, the cemetery in Cairo, of one of absolutely successful communities until, I would say, 48 and 56, where they left in its totality almost. One more picture of this synagogue of Rambam, of Maimonides. And this is the renovation. By the way, it was not in the bad shape when I visited the synagogue in Alexandria, but it was renovated now. So it's better than in this picture. In Turkey, oh my God, so many things to say, and we have to go fast. Turkey, well, this was a lucky moment. When I was there, there was a festival in 2007, a Jewish festival in the streets with singing and people dancing, Israeli dancing, which is maybe not possible or not imagined.
No, you wouldn't see this today, as Turkey is going more and more fundamentalist Islamist with Erdogan, and the Jewish community is keeping a very, very low profile.
Did you see that they transformed the Hagia Sophia again back as to a mosque?
That's right.
Also, notice.
Yes, no, and we also can see that there has been an exodus of the community over more people are leaving it in the last 10 years.
Yeah, some of them are taking the Spanish citizenship, taking the opportunity of this. Because they are Sefaradi, so they can take the Spanish citizenship. This was a very interesting document that I found in one of the synagogues in Izmir. It was issued by the Sultan Abdul Hamid II, and it giving permission to build the synagogue or to renovate the synagogue, something like this, which was in theory forbidden for the Zimmi, but as we know that it was not so strict. Right, and
also, if you notice on the top, the Tughral, as it's called in Turkish, is the Sultan's official signature, and that makes this a imperial firman, an imperial decree. And yes, he could do things like that.
This is well, when I saw this, I read easily, although my Hebrew is not that good, because it's not Hebrew.
It's not Hebrew, of course.
It's Ladino, and it's written "Es defendido de hablar en la Kehillah," which is very easy for any Brazilian to understand. So I thought it was interesting, and of course, so many wonderful small synagogues in Izmir. One of them, which is not here, not so beautiful, was the synagogue, the Portuguese synagogue in Izmir, which is said that it was one figure used to attend the synagogue was Shabbatai Tzvi. They say. I'm not sure about it.
And by the way, notice how completely different the architecture is of the synagogues here from Morocco. Completely different. That's the Andalusian style, and this is a sort of Italianate Levantine mix style. Completely different.
Well, in Iraq, I have the opportunity to visit Zaho, and Zaho was known as the Jerusalem of Kurdistan. And this I've heard when I went to your when you launched your encyclopedia of Jews in Islamic world of one of your colleagues, and then I was motivated to visit Kurdistan because of this conversation, and I went to Al-Kosh, and I took the picture of the Prophet Nahum tomb, which is one of the most important sites of Jewish sites in Iraq. There is the tomb of Yechezkel.
Of Ezekiel, of Yechezkel, yes, outside of Baghdad, south of Baghdad.
It's a little bit more complicated. So I didn't took the risk to go to Baghdad at the time. It was not so easy. So I went only to the Iraqi Kurdistan. And finally, we have maybe 5 or 6 minutes to talk about Iran. People are telling here, just for you to know, that you should give us a 2 hours lecture. They want to hear more and more. People are telling me here. In Iran, so many different cities. Maybe the only place that it's comparable to Morocco. I don't know if I'm telling if it's right or wrong, but the number of communities in Iran are very wide as well. They are spread everywhere.
Yes, so, but nothing even remember, Morocco had 3 times the Jewish population of Iran. Morocco was the largest single Jewish community outside the Ashkenazi world.
I lost the presentation here. I don't know what happened. Yeah, but in any case, wow, we lost it here. We are in the end of the presentation. Actually, we have. It's a pity that we could not have time to show some pictures of Iran.
Yes, because I know you had a picture of the tomb of Esther and Mordechai.
Yes.
And as you know, it's made news recently because there has been a call to either destroy it or to turn it into an Islamic shrine. And that they haven't done. One of the things about Iran is that Jews up until the Pahlavi dynasty, because Iran is Shiite Muslim, and they have very strict rules on purity and impurity. For example, a Jew in the marketplace could never touch to look at a vegetable or a fruit, because if he touched it, it would automatically be impure for a Muslim, and therefore he would have to buy it at any price that the seller had it. But because the Pahlavis were secularists and were very much against the religious establishment, they gave Jews, Christians, and Zoroastrians, and even Baha'is an opportunity to serve in public affairs and so on, that ended, of course, with the Khomeini revolution.
I wanted to show a last picture of, but unfortunately I don't know what happened here, of the the synagogue of the Jews of Mashhad, and this is related to what you said right now. And they were obliged to convert to Islam, I think, during the Qajar period. I'm not sure if it was.
That's right. Yes, that's right. In the 19th century.
And maybe it was one of the unique situations that they could roll back to Judaism, which might be seen as an apostasy in Islam, but maybe by the Pahlavi family, right, the Pahlavi dynasty, I think it was during the Pahlavi family dynasty that they went back to Judaism.
Yes, and one of the things that's also so interesting is you have to remember Islam forbids forced conversion. It says in the Quran, "La ikraha fid din," there is no compulsion in matters of religion, and that as long as you acknowledge the suzerainty of Islam, you can have freedom of religion, freedom of economic endeavor, and communal autonomy. But the Shiites have their own rules. They say there's an inner and an outer meaning to everything, and that was that all of the forced conversions in the Islamic world, and there are not many of them, but all of them were by non-Orthodox Muslims. And
there's another saying in Quran. They say, "To you, your religion; to me, my religion." There is something like this, right?
Yeah. Well, he's there. God is speaking to the people of Mecca, and he says, "Lakum dinukum wali dini." You have your religion, and I have mine.
Yeah. So,
but that's addressed to the Quraysh, to Muhammad's tribe.
Okay, Professor. Well, I would like again to thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us on behalf of the Brazilian community. Thank you very, very much. I'll pass the word to Sergio Simon right now to end up the presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, Professor Stillman and Miki, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. We could sit here hours and hours and talk about all these countries. I have one last question, Professor Stillman. Is there room for Jews in any of these countries nowadays?
Yes, actually, some Jews have gone back to Morocco, and that's the only one, really. The Moroccans themselves are now trying. First of all, they want Jews to visit. They have been renaming streets in the Jewish neighborhoods back to their original names, which had been changed after the mass exodus, and they teach Jewish history in Moroccan universities, and it is not mere propaganda, but genuine. And the royal family has tried, and the Moroccan elite has tried to maintain contact with the Moroccan diaspora abroad. Remember, I said there were 300,000 Jews in Morocco at the middle of the 20th century. There are now probably over 900,000 Jews of Moroccan descent in mainly Israel, France, Canada, but other countries as well. And there was a major program on Moroccan jewelry that the American Sefaradi Federation put on several years ago, and it was under the aegis of the royal family of Morocco.
Very beautiful. Well, thank you very much, both of you. This evening has been very interesting, and as I said, we could stay here for another hour or so. And I would like to thank both Michel and your beautiful pictures, and Professor Norman Stillman with your encyclopedic knowledge on Judaism in Islamic countries. Thank you very much.
And thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Okay. E com isso nós terminamos a série Epopeia Sefaradi. A partir da semana que vem nós começamos a nova série de história e cultura judaica no Brasil. Muito interessante, com historiadores, artistas e críticos. E mais importante do que isso, nós estamos lançando o programa de depoimentos da comunidade judaica. Então, se você tem uma história da sua família que você quer deixar gravada no acervo do museu, para que ela esteja lá daqui a 50, daqui a 100 anos, é só entrar em contato com o museu no telefone que vai aparecer aí, através do WhatsApp, ou por e-mail no atendimento@museujudaico.sp.org.br, e nós vamos agendar uma gravação por Zoom da sua história, da história da sua família, com documentos, fotos, os objetos que vocês tiverem. Entre em contato conosco e agende para deixar a memória da sua família gravada no nosso acervo. Muito obrigado e até a semana que vem, nesse mesmo horário, às 6 da tarde, na segunda-feira. Boa noite.
Bom dia. Espero estar me comunicando com o Centro de Memória do Museu Judaico. Eu sou Daniela Stransky, de solteira era Whale, e eu abri os olhos ao fato que era a última pessoa viva da minha família. Quer dizer que nossa passagem neste planeta ia se evaporar. Eu queria absolutamente deixar uma semente, uma prova de que eu existi. O problema era deixar a quem todo esse material.
O Centro de Memória do Museu Judaico de São Paulo é o acervo que conta a história da imigração judaica no Brasil. É um dos maiores acervos da América Latina e faz parte do Museu Judaico de São Paulo.
O Centro de Memória consiste num dos melhores acervos em que pesquiso e que já pesquisei. Ali não só encontrei fontes para minha pesquisa, mas também histórias e vidas carregadas de sonhos, medos, desejos, lutas, conquistas e glórias.
E a outra coisa eu acho muito interessante com o Centro de Memória é que essa força também de transmitir a informação para um público não só acadêmico, mas uma população local. Então, essa dimensão me parece muito única.
Esse acervo guardado, ele não tem a mesma importância, ele precisa estar nas mãos das pessoas, né? Então a gente faz palestras, bate-papos, a gente tem o Dia do Objeto, que é um evento muito significativo, que a pessoa traz um objeto e conta a sua história. A gente tem cursos que a gente também promove, exposições.
Parece que não é nada, só são folhas de papel escritas. Mas para mim isso tem mais valor do que muita coisa que poderia ser de ouro, prata, brilhante, o que seja. Ou deixei uma amostrinha de que eu não passei pela vida sem ter existido.